In 2019, a mechanic in Billings, Montana, posted a single photo to a small online forum, and it quietly detonated in every corner of the Rust Belt community. The photo showed the underside of a 1997 Chevy pickup, a truck that had spent 22 years grinding through salted roads and brutal northern winters. The frame looked immaculate, not restored, not repainted, just clean, solid steel, as though the truck had rolled out of the factory that morning. No professional shop, no expensive undercoating service, no sandblasting equipment, just a thin, dark layer of something almost nobody in that forum had ever heard of. A powder that costs $3 at a grocery store, mixed into warm water in a plastic bucket, and brushed onto rusted steel. Within minutes, the corrosion visibly changed. The rust itself transformed into a permanent, waterproof, paintable surface. No grinding down to bare metal, no chemical primers. The rust did the work. That raises a question worth sitting with. Who knew about this? And who decided you shouldn't? Welcome to Extinct Skills, where we dig up what the modern world buried. This is not a new discovery. It is not a garage experiment or a fringe DIY hack that showed up on the internet last decade. The United States military used this exact chemistry to protect tanks, rifles, and naval vessels during World War II. The British Royal Navy was formally documenting it a full century before that, and Roman legionnaires were treating their iron weapons with it 2,000 years ago on the cold, wet frontiers of an empire that could not afford equipment failure. The active compound is called tannic acid. It is a naturally occurring powder found in oak bark, tea leaves, grape seeds, and chestnut wood. You can buy it at a grocery store or a health food supplier for about $3 per 100 grams. And if you have ever purchased a rust converter off the shelf at a hardware store, you have already paid 15 times that price for this exact molecule. You just never knew it. The story of how that happened begins in ancient Rome. 1,400 years before the first industrial factory opened, leather workers across the Roman Empire spent their days standing over massive stone vats filled with a dark, pungent liquid made from crushed oak bark and water. This was tanning, the ancient process of converting raw animal hide into durable leather. The smell was extraordinary. Witnesses writing at the time described it as something that hit you from 50 paces and stayed with you for days. But inside those vats, something was happening that nobody had planned for and nobody could initially explain. Every iron tool that accidentally touched the tanning liquid simply stopped corroding. Iron knives that would normally develop rust within days in the humid Roman air stayed clean and sharp for months after a single brief soak. Iron buckles dropped in by clumsy apprentices came out coated in a thin, dark film that resisted both water and salt air with remarkable stubbornness. Useful knowledge traveled fast in the ancient world because survival depended on it. The tanners told the blacksmiths told the armorers, and the armorers told the generals. By the 2nd century, Roman frontier soldiers were actively treating their weapons before long campaigns into the damp forests of Gaul and Germania. This was not legend. Garrison records, carved into wooden tablets at Vindolanda, a Roman fort near Hadrian's Wall, explicitly reference iron preservation baths using bark solutions, a 2,000-year-old maintenance manual describing the exact chemistry that can protect your tools today. And Rome, it turns out, was only the beginning. When a universal enemy threatens every civilization that works with iron, human ingenuity has a way of finding the same answer independently, on opposite sides of the planet, separated by centuries and oceans. Consider feudal Japan, where the relationship between iron and natural chemistry was arguably more refined than anywhere else on Earth. Japanese swordsmiths faced a specific problem that few people talk about. A katana has a composite structure with a razor-sharp carbon steel edge and a softer, more flexible iron spine that was dangerously vulnerable to Japan's subtropical humidity. Their solution was kakishibu, a fermented persimmon juice rich in tannins, carefully brushed onto the iron core before the final tempering process. The specific formulations used by different swordsmithing schools became trade secrets passed only from master to apprentice, because they worked that well. Travel 6,000 miles west to the Yoruba iron workers of West Africa, who had been smelting iron since at least 500 BC, centuries before it became common across much of Europe. They faced 6 months of tropical monsoon every year, humidity so intense that unprotected iron could develop visible rust overnight. Their answer came from the forest. Tannin extracts from shea bark and acacia pods painted onto machetes and agricultural tools before the rains arrived, producing results that lasted the entire season. Persian metalworkers used crushed pomegranate rind. South American craftsmen used extracts from the cabrao tree, 5 continents, thousands of years apart, and every single one arrived at the same molecular conclusion. This is not folklore. It is convergent chemistry, and in 1813, science finally caught up with what craftsmen had known all along. In a cramped Paris laboratory in 1813, a French chemist named Michel-Eugène Chevreul isolated tannic acid as a pure compound for the first time in recorded history and meticulously documented what it did to iron oxide. For the first time, Modern science could put precise language to what blacksmiths, tanners, and warriors had quietly understood since antiquity. The chemistry is genuinely beautiful once you see it clearly. Tannic acid does not sit on top of rust. It reacts with it. It attacks iron oxide, the flaky orange compound destroying your metal, and converts it into an entirely different substance called iron tannate, a dark blue-black compound that is completely insoluble in water, does not flake, does not spread, and bonds to the steel surface at the molecular level. Think of it like a vaccine. You are introducing the enemy to the body in a controlled way, and the body transforms it into its own armor. The rust itself becomes the shield. That distinction matters enormously because a traditional synthetic primer is nothing more than a bandage. Moisture finds one microscopic scratch, the coating lifts, and the rust underneath has never stopped. You're back to the hardware store, reaching for your wallet. The United States military understood this distinction completely. In 1941, the War Department tested over 200 anti-corrosion compounds at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. A 4% tannic acid solution applied to pre-rusted steel panels withstood over 1,000 hours of continuous salt spray without failure. The best synthetic competitor broke down at roughly 600 hours. Procurement officers immediately began ordering tannic acid in bulk for depots across 3 theaters of war. Treating Jeep chassis, rifle barrels, ammunition cans, and landing craft with the same powder Roman blacksmiths had stumbled onto in their tanning vats. And then the war ended, the chemical industry came home, and somebody made a very deliberate business decision. Here's where the story gets frustrating, and I want to be honest with you about something before I tell it, because the honest version is actually more interesting than the dramatic one. This is not a conspiracy. Nobody sat in a boardroom and voted to suppress ancient chemistry. What happened is something more ordinary and, in many ways, more infuriating. It was simple economics. After 1945, American chemical companies like DuPont and Sherwin-Williams had a problem. They had spent the war years building massive manufacturing facilities, sales teams, and distribution networks around synthetic petroleum-based rust inhibitors. They had engineered entire business models around products that cost 10 to 50 times more to produce than natural tannic acid. A powder that any person could dissolve in a coffee can for $3 was not a product opportunity. It was a direct threat to everything they had built, and the business model won. Tannic acid cannot be patented. It is a naturally occurring compound that oak trees have been producing for millions of years, without charging a licensing fee. You cannot build a service franchise empire around a treatment that anyone can apply with a foam brush in their driveway. You cannot justify a $500 dealership rust protection package when the active ingredient can be brewed from a box of black tea bags. So the industry did what industries do when a cheap, natural solution threatens an expensive revenue stream. They repackaged it. Those rust converter bottles sitting on the shelf at every hardware store in America, selling for $15 to $30 with aggressive branding and bold claims, pull one off the shelf and flip it around. Read the safety data sheet. You will find tannic acid listed as the primary active ingredient. After 1978, new consumer product guidelines allowed manufacturers to list active ingredients under proprietary trade names, so simple tannic acid became stabilized oxide modification technology or proprietary rust conversion compound. Same ancient molecule. New vocabulary, dramatically higher price. The U.S. auto parts aftermarket generates over $300 billion in annual revenue, and corrosion-related repairs account for roughly $90 billion of that, flowing out of American pockets every single year, because most people have never been told that the permanent fix costs $3.45. To be fair, there are legitimate reasons commercial products exist. Industrial environments with extreme chemical exposure, constant submersion, or very high temperatures genuinely require specialized coatings. But for 90% of what everyday Americans actually deal with, truck frames, hand tools, cast iron, cookware, farm equipment, outdoor gear, the markup between what you pay and what that chemistry actually costs is staggering. Now let's take the power back. Here is the exact method. The same fundamental chemistry the Romans discovered by accident, the British Navy documented formally, and the U.S. military deployed across 3 continents. Start by purchasing food-grade tannic acid powder from any grocery store, health food supplier, or online bulk retailer. A 100-gram bag costs between $3 and $5 and contains enough material to treat approximately 40 square feet of heavily rusted surface. Measure 4 grams of powder and dissolve it into 100 milliliters of warm water, stirring gently until the liquid turns the deep, rich color of strong black tea. That is your rust conversion solution, and you just made it in under 2 minutes. Take a wire brush or coarse steel wool and scrub the rusted surface briefly, knocking off only the loose, flaking material. Do not sand it down to bare, shiny metal, and this point is critical. The solution needs existing rust to work. It is converting the corrosion, not replacing it. Apply the solution evenly using a foam brush, a cotton rag, or a spray bottle, then watch. Within 10 to 15 minutes, you will see the surface shift from sickly orange-brown to a dense, dark blue-black. as the molecular conversion happens in real time directly in front of you. Tannic acid is food grade and non-toxic, but at this concentration, it can irritate skin and eyes, so wear basic rubber gloves and use common sense. Allow the surface to air dry completely, 2 to 4 hours depending on temperature and humidity, then apply a second coat using the same process. 2 coats ensure maximum conversion depth. After the second coat cures, the surface is permanently stabilized and ready for any top coat you choose. For camp tools, axes, and pocket knives, finish with a thin coat of boiled linseed oil or melted beeswax. For vehicle frames and undercarriages, follow with rubberized spray or a film of used motor oil. For cast iron cookware, apply a light coat to the rust spots. Allow it to convert. Wash the surface and re-season in the oven as you normally would. 100 grams of this powder treats an entire full-size truck frame, a complete set of outdoor tools, and a full season of cast iron maintenance for a total cost of $3 and about 45 minutes of your afternoon. A professional automotive rust treatment service charges $500 to $800 for what is, at the molecular level, the identical reaction. And with that knowledge firmly in your hands, there is one final thing worth saying. Roman legionnaires knew this, standing over oak bark vats on the misty frontiers of an empire that stretched across 3 continents. Japanese swordsmiths knew it, brushing persimmon lacquer onto folded steel by candlelight in workshops that treated the work as a spiritual practice. Yoruba ironworkers knew it, painting shea bark extract onto their tools before 6 months of relentless tropical rain. Your own great-grandparents almost certainly knew it, boiling oak galls in a cast-iron kettle every autumn to protect the farm equipment that kept the family alive through winter. Today, $90 billion a year depends on you forgetting every single one of their names. Extinct Skills exists for one reason: to make sure you don't. If this video changed how you see the rust on your axe head, your truck frame, or your cast iron pan, share it with one person who needs it. Every share is a piece of knowledge reclaimed, pulled back from behind a branded label, and a $30 price tag. Subscribe to Extinct Skills. These skills did not disappear because they stopped working. They disappeared because someone decided they were worth more locked away than passed on. We're going to keep unlocking them, one vault at a time.